Welcome to our first EUDA webinar. And as always, I give the floor to our director, Director Goosdeel, for the opening remark. Alexis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marika. Welcome, everyone. I think it's always amazing and very strong impression to see that we have people really from all over the world following our webinars. And I think it's the 37th webinar and of the agency, the first of the EUDA. So I want first to thank and congratulate Marika, Ines, Marco, all the colleagues in-house who are, and Mette, all the colleagues who are involved in the, and Bettina, those who are involved in the preparation of those webinars. I think we, thanks to you and thanks to our speakers, every time we manage to attract more participants for more different topics. And I think for me, that's an excellent metaphor of what we tried to achieve in the past and even more with the new agency, which is to give the opportunity for the best available experts to share their knowledge with a broader number of people and help us to have a better understanding. So today we have I will come back to the speakers that, of course, I want to thank for their participation and I want to welcome. I will come back to them in a few minutes. I would like to say that today's topic is extremely important because when we think and we will discuss and learn about preventing substance-related crime in the community, how can we provide safer and healthier environments? Well, we cannot forget or ignore that we are for the moment in a situation in which everywhere in Europe there is an increase of drug-related violence, including in Belgium and in other countries where this was not so much the case only a few months or a few years ago. And not only it is part of the new problems associated to drugs in Europe, but this is a problem that has and may have an even stronger impact on possible changes in drug policy at local, national, and maybe at European level. So we listen already here and there very strong declarations about declaring the war on people who are using drugs or punishing families who have a child that is involved in any criminal activities related to drug trafficking. At European level, the European drug policy and the policy developed by the member states so far was strongly based also on the fundamental rights that are now included in the Lisbon Treaty, since the Lisbon Treaty. And certainly there is one of the strongest characteristics of drug policy in Europe. And I think it's extremely important that this remains the case and that we don't fall in the trap of violence and activities of criminal organizations to go backwards and to declare the war on our citizens. I think it's extremely important, first of all, to understand that we should carefully avoid to increase the vulnerability in our communities. And this is why the topic today is important, because I think for many years in many places in the world, there was a kind of an opposition between kind of a human-centered drug policy that would focus only on prevention, treatment, and harm reduction, including better recognizing the rights of people who are using drugs and associating them to the design of responses. And on the other hand, those who were alerting about problems related to safety and security. And the worst would be to fall in the trap that would try to oppose those two approaches. I think our problem today is extremely complex, much more complex even than before. Why? Because today, part of the risk associated to drug use it's drug-related violence. So if we want to continue to try to be evidence-inspired in our responses, if we want to be the closest possible from what are the real needs, we need holistic, not hostile approach. And to build those holistic approaches, I think the topic of today is one of the best examples, because I think if you look at interesting projects and programs for prevention, many of them are community-based. The question and the challenge being that is not that easy and it's not simple. It frequently relies on the involvement of different policies, different services, different actors, because we speak about our communities and how vulnerable they are, or some of them have become. And if we look at the side, or from the side of law enforcement interventions, or the position of the mayors, if you look at the conclusions of the final statement of the meeting of the European Forum on Urban Security that took place in Brussels in March this year, you can see that the mayors of the city, of course, they need more and better coordination. They need also active participation of law enforcement, but everybody says that law enforcement alone is not enough. And if we look at interesting experiences in the EU or outside the EU, I think community policing is extremely important. And this is an area that in the last 20 years has seen also, at least in some countries, important budgetary cuts. So I think the challenge for us in the EU and everywhere in the world at the end is a question of social, human, and economic development. And we are facing problems, we are facing more complex situation, and therefore, instead of opposing the responses or the approaches, it's more a question of finding new ways to articulate and to put together different actors that maybe in the past were not so much working together. They sometimes even did not understand the language or the professional language or vision from the others. So today, we have a very nice and interesting illustration, and I really want to thank our three speakers for having accepted to share their knowledge and their experience with us. The three speakers are Stefano Ciavella on behalf of Fabio Ciciliano, who is the head of the Protection Department of the Italian government. We have Charlotte de Kock, who is a member of the board for exchange prevention, which is the system and the database that is collecting evidence-based and evaluated prevention programs. And she's a researcher in criminology at the Ghent University in Belgium. And finally, we have Frédéric Gröger-Roth, who's a member of the Crime Prevention Council, working in the Ministry of Justice of Lower Saxony in Germany. So I want to thank you once more for taking the time to prepare the webinar and to be with us. I want to thank Ines Hasselberg, who has the challenge to moderate and to chair this webinar today, and I want to thank her. I'm staying as I usually do. I'm attending the full meeting, and I will share a few concluding remarks if I have any. And in any case, I also can tell you that our next appointment to discuss this topic will be in Brussels the last week of November, when we are organizing the first European conference on drug-related violence, and this is the first new initiative in our quality of recently becoming the European Union Drugs Agency, the EUDA. So I look forward to very interesting presentations and exchanges with the audience, and we speak a bit later at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexis, and we pass the floor to the capable hands of Ines I will switch off my camera, but I will remain in the backstage to follow this very interesting webinar. Thank you very much. Ines, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Marika. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I think we have a great panel of speakers, as just introduced by Alexis, and they will share with us their insights, their experience in this topic. And I'm sure they will lead us to very interesting discussions and make this session very valuable and enjoyable for everyone. We have today 4 questions for our speakers. All speakers will have the chance to address each question before we move to the next one, so that we all get a well-rounded perspective on each point. As Alexis said, unfortunately, Fabio Siciliano is not able to join us today, but we're also fortunate to have Stefano Giavella stepping in to speak on his behalf. And so a big thank you to Stefano for filling in at such a short notice. We really appreciate your flexibility, and we're very looking forward to hearing from you. So again, thank you all for being here, and we'll dive right in with our first question. And for this question, Charlotte will make a brief presentation, and then Frederick and Stefano may comment and build on it if they wish to add something. So passing the floor to you, Charlotte, how is substance use connected to violent or criminal behavior, and what are the main factors behind that link?
First, thanks for having me, for being able to be here today. Can I pass to the slides? To my first slide? Yeah, thanks. It's some technical. Now I cannot switch to my words. Mette, could you maybe, sorry, take it over, because this view does not allow me to look at my Word documents. Thanks, and my apologies. Thanks. So you can see the slides now, right?
Yes, but we see the third slide. Okay, now we see it. Okay.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so the usual technical problems. So first of all, I think it would be analytically incorrect for me to now give you a limitative list of contributing factors, simply because substance use and offending are not, like, per definition interrelated. So the term drug-related crime or substance-related crime can be misleading. And the most obvious difficulty being that substance use or possession is a crime in many member states, despite the United Nations 2019 call to promote alternatives to conviction and punishment. But substance use can lead to offending because it can impair judgment, eliminate inhibitions, and leads to, for instance, aggression, violence, and road violations. It can also lead to property crime aimed at funding substance use. So Goldstein described these types of offending as psychopharmacological and economic compulsive drug-related offending. Offending, on the other hand, may also lead to substance use from an opportunity perspective. So people involved in offending may have unique access to substances in the context of gangs, but also imprisonment. They may navigate environments where substance use is normatively more accepted or viewed as the only option to escape the reality of, for instance, imprisonment. So in these accounts, it is clear that substance use-related offending is dependent on many different factors. One can cause the other, but doesn't necessarily do so. One may accelerate the other, and both could appear conjointly because they are caused by common factors. Understanding this interplay between these factors and their context is key in devising strategies and interventions to reduce specific types of substance-related crime. Goldstein's tripartite taxonomy of drug-related crime was useful in the sense that it first distinguished between offending related directly to substance use on the one hand and offending related to drug markets on the other hand. This third type was described as systemic crime, next to the psychopharmacological and economic compulsive categories that I just described. Nevertheless, this division does not allow to understand all complex mechanisms that underlie substance-related crime. The 3 types actually overlap, and their validity is insufficiently substantiated in research. So if you could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I would like to extend your question, Ines, to the public here today. What do you focus on? Which type of substance-related crime are you focusing on? Can you make it more specific? Think of specific situations and target populations. This will enable all of us to do justice to the complexity of the phenomena and the people involved. I think it's key to clarify the identified targeted populations and settings within the larger legal and socioeconomic background, and only then systematically identify influencing factors in mechanisms. This specificity is key in designing theory-based interventions. It requires understanding the causal pathways and their contexts. I will come back to some concrete evidence interventions that are already mentioned in the slide later in the debate. But I found it important to start out with these nuances when wanting to define influencing factors. In conclusion, I want to emphasize an important critique to Goldstein's tripartite division that is parallel to critique to behavioral prevention. The need to also consider external causes of substance use and offending outside the individual and besides its capacities to make rational choices. This critique has also been raised in the recovery and resistance movement, which emphasizes that interventions should not only target the reduction of substance use, crime, or drug-related crime. Intervention should also focus on transforming communities, improving environments, and enhancing the quality of life. Defining how and which external factors impact what substance-related crime in specific populations will be crucial in the future debates on what environmental interventions can do in reducing substance-related crime. I think this is my answer to your question.
Thank you so much for that, Charlotte. I really appreciate you breaking down this connection and helping us understand the factors involved. Frederick, I believe you also have a few slides to show us. I'll give the floor to you now.
Yes, first also thanks for inviting me. And these are only 2 slides, even if there's going on a lot on these slides. But it's just the idea to make one point of Charlotte even more, getting more into detail. So we have a long history all over the world of longitudinal studies who are looking into the factors that from a perspective of the development of children and young people, what factors are there that increase the risk that they are involved in violence and drug abuse and other behavioral problems. And all over the world, there are several studies that find that these are not very different factors in different contexts, this is a set of factors that are listed here located in a family, in the school, in the peer and individual domain, and also in the community domain. And what all these connections are mean that we know from science and from this kind of studies that several risk factors are predictors of much or very different problem behavior. So just take the first example, family history of problem behavior. We know if children are raised in families who are already involved, the parents, into drug abuse or alcohol abuse, they have a higher risk to be involved also, not only in drug abuse, but also in violence and delinquency. So if you are doing targeting interventions that are able to lower this risk factor, you are able to prevent a lot of behavioral problems. So this is the idea of this list. And also from the other way around, so just maybe you skip to the next one, we know a lot about protective factors. These are the good things in the life of children and youth, and I'm not sure why it don't move. Oh, thanks. So you see also that there are a lot of protective factors also in these different domains that help young people to be stay away from these problem behaviors. And you see also there's a much commonality. So this prepares a little bit for the second questions, what kind of interventions are able to prevent these problems, because we know from science that if you want to prevent a problem, you need to change the predictor of this problem. So this was my intervention here. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Frederick and Charlotte. And I think with that, we actually move forward to our next question very smoothly. And here it's, in this question, we are asking the speakers what they can tell us about the latest scientific evidence on effectiveness of prevention interventions in reducing crime and violence related to substance use. And Frederick, I give the floor to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. So this is just, I'm not sure if I'm able to move the slides, but it's only, I promise it's only 2 here again. So if this is a case that all these different risk and protective factors are influencing these different behavioral outcomes, then it's also so, and we see this also from research, that an effective prevention intervention may be something that helps families to raise their children better. Then this is also have multiple outcomes. It's not only on crime, not only on violence, but also on drug use, on mental health, and other things. So the good news is that you can use to prevent drug-related crime at any of the effective programs, because they will do both things at once if they are really effective. And here are some examples of prevention interventions that we know that are effective. So, for instance, the Nurse-Family Partnership Program, where early in the family development, young mothers getting help in raising the children. We have the social emotional skill trainings for youth, like the life skill trainings. We have what teachers can do in school, classroom management techniques, like the good behavior game. We have all this kind of anti-bullying programs. We have mentoring, where all the children or young people are connected directly to younger people at risk. And we have all this kind of environmental approaches, where communities or municipalities can change the environment, like here in the Stockholm Against Drug Abuse program, the leisure time environment. And to make it easier for you to find the effective programs, there are in several countries initiatives to build on registries. So this are online list where researchers are compiling the evidence that we have about this. So one flagship idea of doing this is the blueprints in the US, but Charlotte will talk later on the exchange on the EU level. And our product, what we have done, this is the green list in Germany, where we compile all the information that we have about available effective programs. So this is one part that we know, but we know also that all the effective programs do not get their results if they are not implemented good. So this is the latest research findings, that implementation quality matters a lot. And we have some replication studies of effective programs that were not successful. And if you look closer at it, it's usually because of implementation problems. And this is also what community leaders can influence, because if you look at the factors that are influencing implementation quality, for instance, leadership involvement, like a school principal, a mayor, a police chief, if they are supporting this kind of interventions, they are usually implemented better with better effects. So this is the message from implementation science. And so the main message is that we are just know what to do, but we do not see this kind of programs disseminated on a scale that they really can change something on population level. So another initiative is now to develop what we call prevention delivery systems, that are coordinated activities to help communities, municipalities, and other stakeholders to implement programs better. And I will talk about this a little bit later on the other questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. I think this was a very clear presentation of many of the issues that surround prevention programs. Charlotte, you have also worked in this area and you have extensive experience in the field of prevention, also with your work with Exchange. So I'll give the floor to you now.
Thanks, Ines. I certainly want to link to what Frederick has said. Much of the work that has been done within the Community That Cares project has actually been translated into the Exchange database, and most of the majority of the interventions that he mentions are also to be found in the Exchange database. For instance, Triple P is one of the interventions that's not yet in there, but we will be evaluating it in a month, and it will most probably appear in it in some months. So, but as I mentioned, when we think about evidence, I think it's important to define specific populations, settings, and outcomes. If you could just move to one more slide. Thank you. So if we think about young people, social and cognitive support adapted to specific risk factors and developmental phases has been evidenced to delay and decrease substance use and delinquency. In the school setting, for instance, there's Preventure, a personality-targeted intervention, the Always Bullying Prevention Program, and a brief social norms intervention were all rated possibly beneficial and higher in the Exchange database. If you think about parents in general, or specifically those of youth involved in offending, parenting interventions have been evidenced to decrease offending in youth who use substances. Effective interventions focus on life domains and family-specific factors in addition to cognitive, behavioral, and emotional factors. So functional family therapy, multi-systemic therapy, nurse-family partnerships, and multidimensional treatment are promising. So they're also rated all possibly beneficial and up or higher in the Exchange prevention database. There's also tertiary and indicated prevention for substance users, but I'll come back to that later on in our talk. So, but in terms of evidence, it will be necessary in the future to have more longitudinal studies, such as, for instance, the seminal Perry preschool evaluation in the USA. So we know what the long-term impact of these, for instance, youth and parented targeted interventions, what the impact is, on drug-related crime. Most crime, violence, and substance use related prevention has been evaluated and implemented in schools. So we really need additional studies on community-based and environmental crime, violence, and substance use interventions. Also, multiple sources of data, such as police statistics, etc., should be collected to assess crime, violence outcomes in innovative evaluations designs that go beyond the classical gold standard of randomized controlled trials.
Thank you very much, Charlotte and Frederick. I think this was a very instructive presentations, and picking up on that, we are now zooming in on communities and what they can do to mitigate risks. We'll also be talking in this next question about training needs of the people who are involved in community action. We will now start with Stefano, who is first sharing a video with us. Let's see if we can do this smoothly. Yes, it's coming up. Stefano, the floor is yours now.
Yes, thank you. So, in the beginning, I would like to say that I agree with Charlotte and with Frederick about their presentation. And there are a lot of things that are present also in the work that we made in Italy for Caivano. It's also to say that we have in this case we have violence not only for the different gangs that we have that they because they want to control the territory, because they want to make more money and so on. But we have also a lot of cases where the violence is inside in your home, no, in the family. Why, when you have, for example, one son who is a drug addict and he wants the money, sometimes he can also hurt his parents, not to steal money to go to buy the drug. So there are a lot of cases of violence, and also about all the prevention interventions like family, school, community therapies, and so on. We have to say that it's important that when people after the therapy, for example, one type of therapy, when he finished his therapy, he had to go in a place that he want to stay in that place. The urban environment and the services that the environment can offer you are a good thing to reduce this kind of problems. And we tried to make this in Italy. Why and how? I say, because I heard a lot of times the word mayor. In this case, in Caivano, we operated without a mayor. So a little main legal framework is that in Italy we have one law that can appoint an extraordinary commissioner to solve or to try to solve some objectives, okay, and some problems in the territory. And in the same way, we have also a law, a national law for municipalities that say that if a municipality has organized crime issues inside its administration activity, no, the municipality is dissolved. Okay, so everybody go home, and a commissioner from the prefecture arrive in that municipality. So in this case, in Caivano, we operated without a mayor, but with a local commissioner and a national commissioner. Okay, this is the main legal framework. And we had to set up and to draw, we can say, to plan a national plan for the development and the interventions to make in Caivano. So we are not talking about now in police forces actions, okay, but in structural interventions that we were going to do on the territory. It's clear that it's more expensive than a social intervention, okay, because we build something, no, as you can see in the movie. But this national plan has three big pillars. Okay, one is for the infrastructural infrastructural interventions. Is a pillar. Then we have also to improve conditions of social and youth vulnerability. Okay, and then also the third, but not the last, because we have to also improve and help the municipal administrative system to go by oneself. Okay, so to try to help the operational capacity inside the municipality. Okay, because it's important that also the municipality works well to make that all the people stay well. And so we have this plan that has a lot of different areas of interventions. So we have about urban areas, parks, some buildings, some public buildings. We operated not in private buildings. This is important. Only in public buildings with the requalification actions. And on the other side, we go and not to decide alone what to do, but we go with different stakeholders, because one of the main objectives, targets, was to listen the population. So in different groups, because some groups have some interests, some groups has some different interests. So we organized also different meetings with the population, and in the churches or in some social associations and so on. Try to understand before writing the plan, we can say, how was their desires, what they want on their territory, so we can work with them also together, because it's important when you make some interventions, also infrastructural intervention, to have the population with you. Because if you don't have the population, is useful. Then at the end you have some very beautiful buildings, but if they don't use these buildings, we waste money. So I think that that was important to make this new approach. That is not only a police forces approach. The police forces work; they work, but we are close to them, but to make other kind of intervention, a different approach. We try to make this new model in Italy. It's a new model that we try to go on the territory, and not only in the municipality of Caivano, but in the district of Caivano. Okay, to make Caivano starts to be not the city like Gomorra. Okay, but a town that can offer school, university, sports, social activities, and so on. This is maybe 3 minutes. So if you want, I stop, so I can go on.
Thank you, Stefano. I'm sure there will be very interesting questions to develop this case study that you just presented, which was fascinating. I pass the floor now to Charlotte. Charlotte, from your experience, what can you tell us also about the role of communities?
Thank you, Ines. I think many of the community factors and the importance of community leadership and partnership and the comprehensive approaches wherein interventions take place have already been outlined by Frédéric and Stefano. So I will focus rather on the environment. And the difference between community and environmental prevention is sometimes unclear, but environmental prevention rather looks at the physical normative context in which behavior occurs, whereas community interventions tend to focus on addressing intentional and motivated change in individuals and communities. Could you maybe put up the slide? Yeah, thanks very much. But there is, of course, some discussion in literature also about this difference. We are currently, there is ongoing discussion about this. So, but from a health perspective, environmental interventions, some of them have been mentioned by the previous speaker, can attribute to greater equity in, for instance, health behaviors. And environmental prevention departs from the idea that we are not always reasonable, rational, or able to control our behaviors. In that sense, for instance, the regulation in nightlife, such as clubs and bars, have been evidence to reduce offending in terms of aggressive behavior or road violations. Training nightlife personnel, for instance, to deal with intoxication can contribute to less offending, as evidenced in the Swedish STAT intervention that has always also been mentioned by Fredrik before. But when designing environmental prevention, I think the health and criminology domain, theoretically, analytically, have much to learn from one another. In criminology, some situational interventions have indeed clearly shown to be effective in reducing certain types of offending, as they are aimed at influencing the efforts, risks, rewards, provocations, and excuses that underlie offending, so including some types of drug-related or substance-related offending. But more research is needed on how substance users experience environments and to what degree, for instance, increasing effort and risk can contribute to their well-being. Social exclusion, displacement of use, and the related risk factors such as domestic violence or unsupervised risky substance use practices. So despite the fact that we have promising evidence that has also been rated in the Exchange Prevention Registry, future research really needs to focus on how subpopulation outcomes differ for these interventions and how this affects the cost effectiveness at a macro level of specified environmental and community interventions. This was a point I wanted to add to what has been said. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. I think that was a very important point to emphasize, and that brings a lot into the discussion. And I wonder now if Fredrik, if you have any thoughts on all of this, not just the question, but also the contributions of your previous speakers.
Yeah, so I think I have a few words. So what I found interesting on the presentation of Stefano and the example is at one time the importance and the role of broader policy frameworks that enables communities and municipalities to be active. So I think this should be also so addressed that there are policy frameworks that are supportive and in other situations that are not, and then it's difficult for communities and municipalities to take action on their own. But it's possible, and I think there's also another positive and important message in there that you do not need every local stakeholder, but a critical mass of it to move forward and to get into action. And this is also what we try to support with local crime prevention councils. So we have 200 in Lower Saxony to support this kind of work. But what we also see is as more the situation becomes complex, it's more difficult for key stakeholders to agree on topics. So if you think about stakeholders coming from the school system, from the youth care, from welfare, from health, from police, it's took a long time to agree on certain topics because of the complexity. And I always appreciate how Charlotte shows what kind of things has to be considered. You need to come into action on the local level, to need to prioritize, to need to find a point where you start and where you combine all these things. And if the perspectives are so different, it is sometimes hard to come to agreement. So this is leads also to the second part of the question: what kind of training is needed? And I would add, what kind of instruments our local stakeholders need? It's about to do good analysis, to find out not only what are the most pressing needs, but also to how to agree on it. How you need local coordinators that are able to communicate with all these different stakeholders and to find some consensus. And this is not self-evident, and this is not what everyone brings to the table. And I think there's a very good opportunity for more training in this area than we have before. And I think there are some promising approaches like the European Prevention Curriculum, but we need just more on this because I think this is so crucial.
Thank you, Fredrik. We still have one question left, but before we move on to our final question, I was just wondering if any of the speakers has any question for each other, or if they want to add or build something on it.
Yes, I would only to add, because I have a lot of things to add, but there is no time maybe for the next webinar. Also because it's difficult to make this project, to explain this project in so little time. But I would like to say that the funds, the money to make this intervention were provided from Europe. So Europe has a lot of, the name is cohesion funds. I don't know if you know, but I imagine you know. There are for some specific areas of Europe. So in this case, we have involved these kinds of funds to make these kinds of interventions.
Thank you, Stefano. I think, Charlotte, you wanted to say something as well?
I would just like to add like 2 or 3 critical phrases or questions. And we've been talking a lot about community leadership, about interventions and strategies. I think it's indispensable to really look at indeed drug policies. How do we integrate substance use, possession? How do we define drug-related crime in our legal systems? And how does that affect what we can do in communities? This is a very hard exercise. Also, evaluation-wise, it requires a lot of different data, innovative designs, etc. But there have been interesting efforts there. I'm thinking about the work of Alex Stevens, but we should encompass these evaluations of interventions in our broader views on substance use in society and how this is translated in policy. I just wanted to add that next to the need to look at community leaders, etc. We need to really look into what's the influence of policy on the outcomes we see in society. Thanks.
Thank you, Charlotte. It's a very good point, and it actually leads us into the next question very smoothly. And so for the 4th and final question that we're asking your speakers, we are asking you if you can highlight some notable European initiatives in preventing or reducing crime and violence related to substance use, but also what strategies appear the most promising for future success. And I'll give the floor to Stefano. Stefano, you already told us you've presented this beautiful case study, the experience of Caivano, but are there other initiatives in prevention or other approaches that you feel from your work and from your experience that are very promising for the future?
As I said, this is called a model of Caivano. Now we are today we are testing this model because it's not finished. So we started, and because you know that to make this project you need also time. But another thing that I would like to underline is because also Charlotte speaks a lot about the communities, groups, and so on, about the difficulty sometimes to inform these groups. Okay, because we make a lot of meetings with these groups. But the problem was that sometimes there are some groups that are not agree with your work, or maybe they want to defend their own interests. Okay, and so now we have today another problem, that is this social media. That sometimes social media programs that sometimes it's difficult to control. Okay, not to control, but it's difficult that they make the real and the right information for everybody, because today it's very easy for a group to make a Instagram group or Facebook group, I don't know, and to spread out a lot of fakes. And so this was one of the most difficult situations that we had during this project. How we can communicate the right information to the population. Okay, the information about projects that we decided with the population. Okay, so the communication also was and is one of the most important themes that we have to manage during this kind of project.
Thank you, Stefano. Frederick, from your experience, are there other interesting projects or approaches that you would like to point out here?
Yeah, I do not have a direct answer to Stefano, but one part of my contribution should here to mention networks of cities that are working collaboratively together to have an exchange about what kind of problems do they have, but also what kind of solutions do they find. And I like to mention the EFUS, European Forum for Urban Safety, network of over 300 municipalities working for years together in Europe. And we see this as a very good example of gaining knowledge together, finding solutions for common problems, exchanging best practices. And I'm quite sure that all of this the questions that Stefano raised, there are maybe some examples in other European cities that I'm also not aware of, but networks of common learning about like the EFUS, I think it's a very promising approach also for the future. And the other part is that specific support systems for municipalities and communities to solve this problem. So what was already mentioned, the communities that care approach. This is a very systematic way to support communities to find solutions. So there's, for instance, in Malmö city, a very promising way to implement this. I like also to mention other systems like the Icelandic model, and there are others in the US, the Prosper system, and so on. So I think we need to look more systematically on which ways can we compile together to give better support for municipalities to work on these topics.
Thank you, Frederick. I'll pass the floor to Charlotte, who is going to tell us a little bit about the exchange program, but we'll also round off this question.
Thank you, Ines. So you asked, can you highlight some notable European initiatives in preventing or reducing crime and violence related to substance use? A complex question. And I think throughout this debate, I was wondering also about the difference that we should definitely make about interventions, programs, strategies, etc. But I won't go into that in depth now. I will give 3 examples of interventions, 2 of which are based on what we included in the exchange prevention registry. But first, I wanted to emphasize that tertiary or indicated measures and interventions among substance users prove to be promising, although they are out of the scope of this debate and exchange. And this is especially important, certainly considering that, for instance, 60% of Belgian inmates use substances and that many of them are detained for substance use-related offenses. So it needs to be said that the focus on the outcomes of treatment, substitution therapy, drug courts and drug rooms tend to be positive and need to be studied more in depth. There is currently a natural experiment ongoing in Belgium, funded by the Belgian Science Policy Office, to measure the outcomes of drug rooms in Brussels and Liège. So I think we should really keep our eyes on these types of outcomes, which are expected, these specific ones, in 2026 by the Ghent University team of Professor Fabril and Van der Plassen, as well as other tertiary interventions that can impact substance-related crime. Now, when you search the exchange prevention registry, and I would just like to ask you to show the starting page, thank you. When you search this registry for environmental settings and the outcome crime, you will get insights in 2 interventions rated possibly beneficial. So the STAD program in nightlife settings in Sweden and municipal alcohol regulations in England and the Netherlands. So STAD aims to create a better and safer bar and pub environment by reducing alcohol-related problems such as violence and injuries. The STAT method is based on a structured and long-term effort and consists of a multi-agency partnership between government and industry. Also a 2-day training for responsible beverage services for bar staff and management, as well as improvement in law enforcement. Secondly, the local alcohol strategies or regulations are aimed at both regulating the availability and modifying the drinking environments. There's emerging evidence that these strategies lead to less alcohol-related injuries among specific populations, as studied in, for instance, Amsterdam. In England, an evaluation based on a time series model demonstrated a decrease in alcohol-related violence, sexual assault, and nuisance related to increased licensing enforcement. So what we conclude from these two examples is that intervention-wise, and in the second instance, the strategy, there's most evidence concerning alcohol-related offending, and more research is needed concerning the impact of other types of environmental prevention, as well as tertiary interventions in populations involved in resistance and recovery journeys, although that's outside the scope of exchange. So these interventions also need to be studied within broader strategies and within their broader context. But in conclusion, of course, I want to recommend all participants to have a look at the Exchange Prevention Registry and explore the interventions which have been included there. This registry was developed in 2017-18 by the EUDA, the MCDDA, in cooperation with the EU SPR. And I think it's a very useful tool for both policymakers and practitioners to advocate for evidence-based prevention. The registry is usually updated by the beginning of each year at latest. And as you can see, you can search interventions via different combinations of queries, such as setting, outcome, and member states, where they are implemented or evaluated. So that's it for my promotional talk. I hope you will all have a look there, and I'm looking forward to your critical questions and remarks too. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. We will put on the chat the direct link to the exchange program webpage so that people can more easily access. And so rounding off, and I just wanted to thank you so much to all the speakers for your contributions. I feel you have provided us with a lot of valuable information, a lot of food for thought. And it is now time to open the floor to questions from our audience. If you have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to submit them. You have a button with a Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Please use that button instead of the chat, and we'll address as many as we can in the time we have left. I believe Marika has been keeping an eye on the questions you have put forward so far. Marika, any thoughts on where we should start?
Yes, there is a first question from Greece, to which partially I believe Stefano has answered. That is, if there are any funding programs or European Union guidelines for municipalities that can be utilized in order to implement prevention projects. About the funding, probably we are less in the right forum for discussing this, but about the evidence, maybe Charlotte and Frederick, would you like to reiterate, because you have already talked about the evidence. So I guess it's again about our exchange registry of evaluated.
Summarize the question. Sorry, I was also looking at the chat.
No, sorry. The question was if there are any European guidelines for the implementation of prevention projects at municipality level.
Yes, certainly. I do not work at the European Drug Agency, of course, and I think this is something that the president will also emphasize, maybe, that there are there's standardized training that is offered by the EUDA at a very local level also, and I think this is a very important effort to professionalize the workforce and to also do some policy advocacy bottom up to demonstrate that it is necessary to choose prevention strategies and interventions that are evidence-based, because this is still a very important work that we should do in many European countries, also in Belgium, in many European countries, that to look to implement evidence-based work and to provide support to prevention workers, and the EUDA does that. I don't know if the director wants to add to that.
The director in general concludes our remarks. If you don't mind, I would pick another question that is about the risks of younger people be groomed into crime, organized crime. And I think this is also a concern that exists at the Commission level, how to prevent young people entering into criminal activities. I don't know. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so there was just finished a recent research project in a German context called Contest, where they looked if there are specific risk protective factors for family-based gang involvement in Germany, and they took also interviews with people coming from this field, looked at all the literature, and they confirmed the picture that we also have from other studies, that there are no specific risk factors for gang involvement that are different from the risk factors for criminal and drug involvement in general. So these are only situations where they are not only affected by certain family circumstances, but also integration within school doesn't happen in the wrong peer groups, and also in communities that are supporting some antisocial norms. So it's a combination or the accumulation of specific risk factors that leads to this. But if this is true, then also the usual preventive programs that are supporting families, supporting schools, doing all the kind of skill training, and also the environmental programs should also contribute to the prevention of gang violence. So this is maybe counterintuitive that you only think of things that are happening later, but if you look from an early preventive perspective, this may be one answer that we can give to that.
Thank you, Frederick. Charlotte, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I completely agree with Frederick. Also, in terms of cost effectiveness, it is much better to invent in prevention interventions in schools, in the environment, in communities, that will prevent crime, antisocial behavior, substance use among youth before they occur. Because it is more expensive to deal with it in the criminal justice system. So I think policymakers often underestimate the impact, the cost effectiveness of preventive efforts that preventive effect that they can have on the outcomes of drug-related crime among youth, as well as substance use and crime among youth.
It's very clear, Stefano. I believe, if I can interpret what we have seen in the video, that the strategy was to promote alternatives to behavior, like setting up gym support and school, and attracting cultural activities. So this is also probably an approach. I don't know, Stefano is there?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. You make goal, because it's this also, because how to prevent that young people go into the deep of drugs. You prevent this, making these offers of services, because the young people, instead of to go into a gang, they go to play football, to play in the swimming pool. They have some culture activities also. They can have places where they can meet. The reality is that these places, especially Caivano, they have no places where the people can meet. Okay, so this is also another problem. Okay, so at the end they go in places where there is the crime, and so the crime is also seen as the best thing to do, while it's not real, this thing. So I think that sometimes, because I worked on Caivano, but my background was in civil protection. No? And so when Charlotte speaks about prevention, it's exactly like in civil protection. If you invest money in prevention, no, like in civil protection, if you make information to the population, training courses, emergency plans, and so on, you can face the emergency in a better way, and with low costs. Because to manage an emergency, like in this case the drugs, when they are into the drugs, is more expensive than to invest money in prevention activities. So I think that is a very clear example that Charlotte.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is very clear. We have a VIP question, Alex Stevens. We take an opportunity to greet him, and he asks, it's a nice provocative question, because he asks if in exchange we also have information on rigorous studies that show null results for prevention interventions. Charlotte, you are our expert in exchange, so I leave the question for you.
Thank you. We had various discussions about that over the past years, and we have unanimously decided in the board that it is important to include these studies too. Yes, more so to include studies that have shown negative effects. And so we have a whole rating system from additional studies recommended, for instance, possibly beneficial, likely to be beneficial. You can check this whole rating system, which is very rigorous on the website. But we have added one rating category where we include studies that are of good quality, but that show null or negative effects. So yeah, we actively include these in the interventions. Now I should make I should also note that the studies that we include are the result of what we receive by implementers and researchers, what they send to us. Of course, we also proactively scout to a limited extent, but we mainly are dependent on what is sent to us. So we really encourage you to send these studies over to us so we can include them in our yearly rating procedure.
And yes, I would reinforce the invitation of sending us studies and programs, because our capacity to reach out of this information is not so strong as we would like. There are a couple of questions that I wouldn't face in this context, because they are more about the overall policy on drugs. I think they are very important, and we will definitely organize another webinar when these issues will be discussed. Is the overall laws about the consume of substances, and another one is about if there are any consequences for the countries where, beyond the social consequences, for the countries that are having some types of policies rather than others. At this point, if Alexis is ready, I would give him the floor for some conclusive remarks, as always in our webinars. Alexis, are you there? I cannot see you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank again the speakers. It was very stimulating, and I really wish that Charlotte, Frédéric, and Stefano and others will join us for the conference on drug-related violence in end of November in Brussels. Yeah, it's a difficult exercise, as you can imagine. Plenty of things, very interesting. So cherry-picked 2 or 3 of them because I think it allows me to highlight some of the topics or some of the questions we receive frequently, and also some of the challenges. So one of the, well, again, thanks very much because you all provided a lot of food for thought. And we don't have time to comment everything, so I'll focus. Well, many things to say about the presentation, the different elements shared by Charlotte. I will take one that is dear to me because we listen more and more in the political discourse, in the media, very bizarre things. And I think Charlotte, she has highlighted very well that it's not only people who are using drugs that we need to support and not punish. It's also the families, and not only the families of people who are using drugs, but vulnerable families, like those families that are really vulnerable, both socially and economically, and of which some children may be involved in some criminal or close to become criminal activities, whether it is about drug trafficking or anything else. I think the idea to punish them and on the top of their vulnerability to cut the social benefits is really a bad idea. I will not comment it more, but I think it's a bad idea. We talk about human development. We talk about our fellow human beings. And I think this idea that if you punish the families, then everything will be controlled, I think it goes together with a very wrong idea about prevention. The old idea is that if you do the things well, if you are a perfect parent, then there are no problems, which means there are perfect families, and then there are the bad families. And I think it's a shame. Not only it's intellectually wrong, it's this idea that, and it has also a social dimension, because most frequently in more rich family, that we consider that, well, in rich family, we have all the means, and the poor families, they always have problems. Well, sometimes rich families may have even more important problems than poor families. And this way of depreciating the fact that we all of us, all those who have families, or at least if we don't have a family, we belong to a family, well, we all do our best. And what we learn, and it's in mental health, it's nothing to do with addictions in particular, is the fact that in family therapy, I have the privilege to have an education and to have practice as a systemic family therapist, trained in Louvain, following the school of Milano. I had the privilege to listen to Mara Selvini many years ago. It's that mistreatment, harassment, the lack of parental skills, it is something that you don't just need to tell people what they have to do, what they don't do. It's there is a transmission between generations. If you have not learned, if you have not experienced, then you may not be competent, but you are not necessarily guilty for that. So I think the reference to functional family therapy, multi-systemic therapy, nurses, when we look in mental health and cooperation to development, in our university, we have followed the mental health program to support work in the slums in Santiago de Chile, or in Colombia, or in Ecuador, or in Bolivia. Well, the roots of the problem are more or less the same. The expression of the problem is associated to the context, to specificities of the economic situation of the country. It's the same in our country, and what we see more and more, and the different economic crises, and the COVID pandemic, and the impact of some of the measures have increased this vulnerability in terms of mental health, but it also has, in some cases, increased the socio-economic vulnerability. So instead of punish, it's a huge investment we need. So there is no quick and cheap formula for that. Only some quick and cheap declarations in the media. But if we want to build, first we need to build together with the people, and with the families, and with the communities, which means it requires a huge investment. And for the moment, I would say a bit too frequently, we hear more about cutting in public health budget, in support from the society to the citizens, instead of building with them and for them. So I think that's a challenge. And everything is running around. So it's difficult. It leads me to the second point I wanted to highlight. It's the question of evaluation. I think evaluation is important. It was also mentioned by all of you. I think it's important also because what we hear, for instance, from the support we give to identify, to define performance indicators for drug consumption rooms, for instance, is today in many cities or many countries, the debate is about, in fact, the wrong expectations some people may have for one type of service. So there is no way to get people entering into treatment massively because they are clients of the drug consumption room. Does it mean that the drug consumption room doesn't need to be connected with the other service? Of course not. Does it mean that it doesn't have a potential indirect impact? Well, of course not, because the first thing in the low threshold center is to have, again, treating people as human beings, is giving them some care. Some of them, they've not seen a nurse for years. They have not received support for years. So that's the first step. So we need to be clear about the expectations we can have from the different programs, which means, again, we need to be holistic and not hostile. And I like to repeat, holistic versus hostile, because this is part of our European model, and we tend to forget it. This means also that when we want to use this information, and Stefano and also Frederic, they gave very interesting experience they shared with us, I think maybe we should promote a bit more the participative action research. This is something that was more widespread 40 years ago. Everybody, almost everybody, forgot about it, and there was suddenly a fashion for statistics and figures. But I'm sorry, only statistics, it can only tell you how many, how much. It will never tell you why and how. So we need to combine, and it has been used in many countries in the past as a very useful tool to help to make a diagnosis of situation and problems with the communities. And it was highlighted by some of the speakers that, of course, there is a competition between some of the people on the field. You need to see, or they need to decide with you what will be the first priority, what is the thing that we can achieve. And I think something important is when we start partnerships and networking, we should not start with the most ambitious objective, because we need to build a partnership. And if you start with something that has a higher probability of failure rather than success, then you may end up with people being demotivated and abandoning the partnership and the collective effort. So that's extremely important. Three last points. I heard, and maybe Charlotte can help me to find the article. I read somewhere on the internet in the last 3-4 months, there was a research by a university in Mexico that was trying to assess, on the basis of the Mexican data about criminal organization, they tried to see what could be the best way to fight against organized criminal organization. And apparently the conclusion was that the best or the most efficient way is to try to avoid people entering at a young age to be involved in those criminal activities. And again, you can say no to drugs, but if those people have no future, do you really believe you offer a serious alternative? So is it the language? Is it stay poor, stay desperate, but only use illicit or licit products? Obviously not. So what is our alternative? And I would be interested to find this study. The last 2 comments, there was a comment about, there was a question about how to involve municipalities. Are there funds available in the EU? Well, we can investigate the question for the funds and share the information when we will find it. But yes, there are a lot of municipalities involved in different activities and networks. I mentioned the European Forum on Urban Security that is gathering more than 300 cities of different size and level. They have their meeting every 3 years. The conference was in Brussels last March, and they do a very, very useful and important work. And we at the EUDA, we have many tracks of work, and unfortunately, many and much more expectations than what we will be able to really deliver. But still, we have a track of work and developing cooperation and providing support to municipalities, methodological and scientific support. So, and we have offered to associate the European Forum on urban security to the organization of our conference on drug-related violence. And then the last point, because there was a question, I think, and there was a comment from Charlotte. We periodically receive either questions or accusations or criticism regarding what is in exchange, what is not in exchange. People wondering, is there only the friends of the director of the EUDA or the friends of someone else? I see Charlotte saying, of course, no. So I just can tell you that there is a scientific evaluation of everything that is submitted to for exchange and for everything we do in the agency in any case. So Charlotte explained very well. For those who are frustrated that their program is not there, well, there may be a few reasons. First, you should present your program. So please do. If it is considered that there is not enough evidence to conclude anything about your program, well, maybe a good idea would be to try to produce more evidence. And you can ask us or exchange, you can ask for recommendations, for support. We can help to orient you towards organizations or experts that have already that experience. And if your program was not deemed being having enough evidence to be conclusive, again, don't hesitate to present again when you produce new evidence about some results. The only thing we need to, so for us, we rely on a system that is robust and that is independent for the scientific evaluation for exchange, and we will continue to do so. So there is no money, no complaint, no political support or push that would oblige the committee that is evaluating, because it's not a EUDA. The committee that is evaluating will always and continue to evaluate on the basis of the scientific qualities. But science is not something absolute forever. Reality changes, knowledge changes, so don't hesitate to present again and to share more evidence. And the last point about this is when we speak about those programs, I think my personal experience for almost 40 years now of practice in different capacities is we have a tendency to speak too quickly too quick about models. I think first we should be a bit more modest, and I think Charlotte and Frédéric and Stefano, they've shown us that we need to be very cautious and very modest and try to understand better what are the different possible factors and which are the factors on which we believe our project can have an impact. And I will tell you that even if there is a limited impact, if we are more rigorous in the way we define it, even a limited impact can be positive. It's just that pretending that one intervention, or once you go in the street and you tell people to stop doing something, as I said in another meeting, if you believe that because you speak once to someone and that person will entirely change its life or its way of life, well, basically you believe you are Jesus or a prophet. And first of all, the prophets, most of them, they did not end very well in their life and their career. And this is not science. This is not how we work. This is not the approach. So if there is a possible contribution, because we involve the community, because we can help to reduce one of the vulnerabilities, if we can find or develop the scientific evidence that this ultimately may contribute to reduce the exposure to drugs or violence or crime, I mean, that's part of the scientific process. It's not funny because it takes more time. Usually scientists cannot show that this was fantastic results and we changed the situation for an entire population. But this is how science progresses. And honestly, you will see at the Lisbon Addiction Conference also in a few weeks from now that there are so much and so many progresses in sciences and in scientific work related to addictions. And it doesn't mean that to be a bit more modest and a bit more reasonable is bad or will lead to show that you are or not allow you to show that what you do is good. I think it's exactly the contrary. And again, I find both for the work presented by Stefano, by Frédéric and Charlotte, and all the people who are contributing to exchange, to the work of EUDA, to the work of the EU SPR and the others, I really want to say again a big thanks, because you allow change to happen. There will be no big change, but there are so many good things happening in Europe and outside Europe. And I think that's even more than before the role of EUDA to make this information available. So yes, together we can, and it's not only for policy in the US, that's what we try to achieve or to contribute every day in the European Union with the EUDA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexis, and all the speakers. As always, we had more questions than time to answer. We will keep track of these questions. They can also inspire new webinars. Those in need of a certificate will receive it. I ask my colleagues to launch the poll. You don't need to remain. We just ask always our audience what we can improve for being better and better. Thank you, everybody.